You've been eating salads your whole life. You've been told vegetables are good for you since you were a kid. But what if one specific green, one you probably already have in your refrigerator right now, is doing something remarkable inside your body after the age of 60? Something that scientists only recently started to fully understand. And what if most people over 60 are either not eating it or not eating it the right way to get the real benefit? I'm Dr. Anthony Fauci, and I want to be clear. I'm not here to sell you a supplement or push a fad diet. What I want to do today is walk you through what the research actually says about spinach and the aging body. Not in vague terms, not with empty promises, but with real science, from real institutions, explained in plain language that you can actually use. Because what happens inside your body when you make spinach a daily habit after 60 is genuinely worth understanding, and it goes far deeper than most people realize. We're going to cover 5 major areas today. We'll talk about what spinach does for your brain, your heart, your bones, your eyes, and your gut, and we'll connect each of those to the specific changes your body goes through after 60. I'll share what studies have found, which journals published the findings, and what the practical takeaways actually look like. By the end, you're going to understand spinach in a completely different way, so stay with me. Let's start at the beginning. The first thing you need to understand is why the body after 60 responds differently to food than it did at 30 or 40. This isn't just a general metabolism slows down conversation. There are specific biological mechanisms that change as we age, and spinach, interestingly, addresses several of them simultaneously. As we get older, the body's ability to absorb certain nutrients from food declines. A paper published in the journal Nutrients back in 2019 pointed out that older adults are particularly vulnerable to deficiencies in folate, magnesium, vitamin K, and iron, not because they aren't eating foods that contain these nutrients, but because the aging digestive tract absorbs them less efficiently. And here's what makes spinach interesting. It is one of the few foods that contains meaningful amounts of all 4 of those nutrients in a single serving. That's not a coincidence I want you to glide past. 1 cup of cooked spinach gives you roughly 66% of your daily recommended folate, about 37% of your magnesium, over 5 times your daily vitamin K, and roughly 36% of your iron. When your body is working harder just to absorb nutrients, eating a food that concentrates so many in one place starts to matter in a real way. Now, some of you might have heard that spinach contains something called oxalates, and that these can interfere with absorption. That's a real consideration, and we'll talk about it. But I want you to hold that thought, because it's more nuanced than the headlines suggest. Let me first take you through what the research says system by system, and then we'll come back to how to eat spinach in a way that maximizes its benefit. Let's begin with the brain, because I think for most people over 60, cognitive health, memory, focus, mental sharpness is near the top of the list of things they think about and worry about. And the research on spinach and brain health is, honestly, some of the most compelling I've come across in recent years. There was a landmark study published in the journal Neurology in 2018 from researchers at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago. They followed over 900 older adults for about 5 years and tracked their dietary habits alongside cognitive testing. What they found was striking. People who ate 1 to 2 servings of leafy green vegetables per day, and spinach was among the top foods in this category, showed cognitive function that was the equivalent of being 11 years younger than those who ate little or no leafy greens. 11 years. That's not a small difference. That's the kind of difference that, if it were a drug, it would be on the front page of every newspaper in the country. Now, why does this happen? The researchers pointed to several specific compounds in leafy greens. One is folate. As we age, elevated levels of a compound called homocysteine in the blood are associated with cognitive decline and increased risk of dementia. Folate helps the body metabolize and lower homocysteine. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition from 2016 found that adequate folate intake was associated with significantly lower homocysteine levels in adults over 65, and this correlated with better performance on memory tests. Another key compound is lutein. You may have heard of lutein in the context of eye health, and we'll talk about that too. But research from the University of Illinois, published in the journal Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience in 2017, found that lutein accumulates in the brain, not just in the eyes, and adults who had higher lutein levels in their blood showed better crystallized intelligence. That's your ability to use knowledge and skills you've accumulated over a lifetime. Spinach is one of the richest dietary sources of lutein on the planet. There's also something called vitamin K1, which spinach contains in abundance. For a long time, vitamin K was mostly talked about in terms of blood clotting, but research published in the journal Neurobiology of Aging found that vitamin K plays a role in the synthesis of sphingolipids, a type of fat that forms part of the protective myelin sheath around your nerve cells. When that sheath deteriorates, communication between brain cells slows down. Vitamin K helps maintain it. Spinach, eaten regularly, is one of the best ways to keep that vitamin K supply consistent. Now I want to talk about something that doesn't always make it into the mainstream conversation about brain health, and that's the folate-depression connection. This matters for our audience because depression in older adults is underdiagnosed and undertreated, and it is often mistaken for normal aging or dismissed as sadness. A large review published in the Journal of Affective Disorders in 2017 looked at multiple studies and found a significant association between low folate levels and increased risk of depression in older populations. Folate is involved in the production of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, the neurotransmitters that regulate mood. When you are consistently low in folate, your brain has less raw material to make the chemicals that keep you feeling emotionally balanced. 1 cup of cooked spinach gives you more than half your daily folate. That is not a trivial number. I want you to really sit with that for a moment before we move on. We're not talking about spinach as a nice salad. We're talking about spinach as a consistent, daily source of compounds that the aging brain is specifically hungry for. Compounds that are harder to absorb from other sources as we get older, and that are linked in real, peer-reviewed research to slower cognitive decline, better memory, and more stable mood. Let's move to the heart. Cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death in adults over 65 in the United States, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And the relationship between spinach and heart health operates through several different pathways, some of which are well established and some of which are still emerging. The most well-documented connection is through nitrates. Spinach is naturally high in inorganic nitrates. When you eat spinach, the bacteria in your mouth convert those nitrates into nitrites, and your body then converts those nitrites into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a molecule that causes blood vessels to relax and widen, a process called vasodilation. This lowers blood pressure. A study published in the journal Hypertension in 2015 from researchers at the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute in Australia found that drinking a high-nitrate spinach beverage, essentially a concentrated spinach drink, lowered systolic blood pressure by about 8 millimeters of mercury in healthy adults. 8 points is clinically meaningful. To put that in perspective, some blood pressure medications lower systolic pressure by 10 to 15 points. Spinach isn't a replacement for medication, but the mechanism is real and the effect is measurable. There's also the magnesium angle. A meta-analysis published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2012 looked at data from 7 studies involving over 200,000 people and found that higher dietary magnesium intake was inversely associated with the risk of cardiovascular disease events, meaning the more magnesium people consumed from food, the lower their risk. Magnesium helps regulate heart rhythm, and low magnesium is surprisingly common in older adults, again, partly because of reduced absorption in the aging gut. Spinach is a reliable magnesium source that the body tolerates well. Then there's potassium. Spinach contains meaningful amounts of potassium, which works in the body to counterbalance sodium. High sodium levels are one of the major contributors to high blood pressure. Potassium essentially helps your kidneys flush out excess sodium. The American Heart Association has recommended potassium-rich diets for heart health for decades, and spinach consistently appears on their recommended food lists. One more cardiovascular connection I want to mention is the role of vitamin K in arterial health. We talked about vitamin K and the brain, but it also plays a role in preventing calcium from depositing in the walls of arteries, a process called arterial calcification. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition in 2020 found that higher vitamin K1 intake was associated with less coronary artery calcification in older adults. Calcification stiffens arteries and raises the risk of heart attack and stroke. Keeping vitamin K levels adequate appears to help slow that process, and again, spinach is one of the best dietary sources available. Now, I do want to flag something important for anyone who is already taking warfarin or other blood-thinning medications. Because spinach is so high in vitamin K, and because warfarin works by interfering with vitamin K activity, sudden large increases in spinach consumption can affect how your blood thinner works. This is not a reason to avoid spinach, It's a reason to talk to your doctor and keep your intake consistent so your medication can be calibrated properly. Consistency matters more than quantity in this context. Let's talk about bones. Because osteoporosis is one of the most quietly devastating conditions that affects older adults, and spinach has an interesting and somewhat complicated relationship with bone health that I want to walk you through carefully. The conventional wisdom is that calcium is the key to bone health, and dairy is the key to calcium. But the research paints a more nuanced picture. Bone density and strength depend on a complex network of nutrients working together. Calcium, yes, but also vitamin K, magnesium, folate, and vitamin C. Spinach contributes meaningfully to all of these. Vitamin K's role in bone health is particularly important and still somewhat underappreciated. Vitamin K activates a protein called osteocalcin, which is produced by bone-building cells called osteoblasts. Osteocalcin helps bind calcium to the bone matrix, literally helping calcium attach to your bones rather than floating around in your bloodstream or depositing in soft tissues. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that higher vitamin K intakes were associated with significantly lower rates of hip fracture in women, even after controlling for calcium intake. Your bones need vitamin K to use calcium effectively. Spinach provides vitamin K in quantities that make a real difference when eaten consistently. Now here's where I need to address the oxalate question, because it matters specifically for bone health. Spinach does contain oxalic acid, which binds to certain minerals, including calcium, and can reduce how much of those minerals your body actually absorbs from the spinach itself. This is real. The calcium bioavailability from spinach is lower than from, say, kale or broccoli, so spinach should not be your only source of calcium if bone health is a concern. But, and this is important, the oxalate issue is mainly relevant to the minerals within the spinach itself. It doesn't mean spinach blocks calcium absorption from other foods you eat at the same time. And the vitamin K in spinach, which helps your body use calcium more effectively, is absorbed well regardless of oxalate content. So the practical takeaway is not to avoid spinach, it's to eat spinach alongside other calcium-rich foods rather than relying on it as your primary calcium source. There's also the magnesium-bone connection to understand. About 60% of the body's magnesium is stored in bone. Magnesium helps regulate parathyroid hormone, which controls calcium metabolism. Low magnesium leads to low calcium, even when calcium intake seems adequate. A 2013 study published in the European Journal of Epidemiology found that higher dietary magnesium was associated with greater bone mineral density in older adults. Spinach's magnesium content contributes to this pathway, even when its calcium contribution is partially limited by oxalates. So the bone health picture with spinach is this. It's a supporting player, not a solo act. It provides vitamin K that activates bone-building proteins, magnesium that supports calcium metabolism, and folate that contributes to healthy bone cell turnover. Pair it consistently with good calcium sources, fortified plant milks, sardines with bones, broccoli, or dairy if you tolerate it, and you have a genuinely bone-supportive dietary pattern. Now let's talk about something that I think surprises most people when they learn it: what spinach does for your eyes. Because many older adults accept vision decline as inevitable, as just another thing that happens with age. And while some changes are natural, the research on nutrition and eye health suggests that what you eat has a measurable impact on how fast your eyes age and whether you develop conditions like macular degeneration and cataracts. The age-related eye disease study, known as AREDS, conducted by the National Eye Institute and published in the early 2000s, was one of the largest and most rigorous studies ever done on nutrition and eye health in older adults. Among other findings, this research established that lutein and zeaxanthin, two carotenoid compounds found in very high concentrations in spinach, accumulate in the macula of the eye and protect it from oxidative damage. The macula is the part of your retina responsible for sharp central vision, the vision you use to read, recognize faces, and drive. Age-related macular degeneration, or AMD, is the leading cause of vision loss in adults over 50 in the United States, according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology. And a follow-up study to the original AREDS research, called AREDS 2, published in JAMA Ophthalmology in 2013, found that supplementing with lutein and zeaxanthin reduced the risk of advanced AMD progression by about 26% in people with intermediate AMD. That's a supplement study, but the dietary research points in the same direction. Regular consumption of lutein-rich foods, particularly spinach and kale, is associated in multiple observational studies with lower rates of AMD development. 1 cup of cooked spinach contains approximately 20 milligrams of lutein and zeaxanthin combined, which is actually higher than the amounts used in the AREDS2 supplement study. Eating spinach is not just a nice complement to eye care, it's one of the most direct dietary interventions available for protecting macular health as you age. There's also evidence connecting spinach's antioxidant content, particularly vitamin C and E, along with beta-carotene, to reduced risk of cataracts. Cataracts occur when proteins in the lens of the eye become oxidized and cloudy. Antioxidants slow that oxidative process. A study published in Investigative Ophthalmology and Visual Science found that higher intakes of antioxidant nutrients from food were associated with a meaningfully lower risk of lens opacification, the scientific term for the clouding that leads to cataracts. Spinach delivers multiple antioxidants in a single food, which is part of why dietary research on greens and eye health consistently shows positive associations. I also want to mention intraocular pressure. That's the pressure inside your eye, because elevated intraocular pressure is a key risk factor for glaucoma, which is the second leading cause of blindness worldwide. Research published in JAMA Ophthalmology in 2018 from Harvard Medical School found an association between higher dietary nitrate intake and lower risk of primary open-angle glaucoma, particularly in the peripheral vision subtype. The nitrate content in spinach is among the highest of any vegetable, and this finding suggests a possible protective mechanism. The nitric oxide produced from dietary nitrates may help regulate blood flow in the optic nerve. Now I want to move to an area of health that often doesn't get the attention it deserves in conversations about aging, and that's the gut. Because what happens in your digestive system after 60 has cascading effects on your immune function, your mental health, your energy levels, and your ability to absorb the very nutrients we've been talking about. The gut microbiome, the community of trillions of bacteria and other microorganisms that live in your digestive tract, changes significantly with age. A comprehensive review published in the journal Aging Cell in 2017 described how the aging microbiome tends to lose diversity, with beneficial bacteria declining and potentially harmful strains increasing. This shift is associated with increased systemic inflammation, which researchers now link to virtually every major chronic disease of aging, from Alzheimer's to heart disease to type 2 diabetes. What does spinach have to do with this? 2 things primarily. First, spinach contains fiber, both soluble and insoluble, that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Specifically, it contains a type of sugar called sulfoquinavose, which is uniquely found in leafy greens. A study published in the journal Nature Chemical Biology by researchers at the University of Melbourne in 2016 found that sulfoquinavose specifically feeds a bacteria called Faecalibacterium prosnitzi, one of the most important anti-inflammatory bacteria in the human gut. When F. prosnitzi thrives, it produces short-chain fatty acids that reduce gut inflammation and strengthen the gut lining. Spinach is literally feeding one of your body's most important anti-inflammatory soldiers. Second, the antioxidant compounds in spinach, particularly flavonoids like campherol and quercetin, appear to have a prebiotic-like effect on the microbiome. Research published in the journal Nutrients in 2020 found that flavonoid-rich diets were associated with greater microbiome diversity in older adults, and that this diversity correlated with lower markers of systemic inflammation. Greater microbiome diversity is consistently one of the strongest markers of gut health and overall metabolic resilience in aging populations. There's also the gut-brain connection to consider, something the scientific community has been paying increasing attention to over the last decade. The gut and the brain communicate constantly through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, primarily via the vagus nerve and through chemical signaling. When the gut microbiome is healthy and diverse, it produces compounds, including short-chain fatty acids and certain neurotransmitter precursors, that travel to the brain and support cognitive function and mood stability. When the microbiome is disrupted, that communication goes wrong. The fiber and phytonutrients in spinach support gut microbiome health, which in turn supports supports brain health. It's the same destination from a different road. I also want to mention that spinach contains thylakoids, structures found inside plant cells, which research from Lund University in Sweden, published in multiple papers over the past decade, has found can slow the digestion of fat and promote the release of satiety hormones in the gut. One study published in the journal Appetite in 2014 found that thylakoid supplementation significantly reduced hunger and cravings for sweet and fatty foods. For older adults managing weight or blood sugar, this is a meaningful finding. Spinach eaten with meals may actually help you feel fuller longer and reduce the tendency to overeat, not because of willpower, but because of biochemistry. Now I want to bring everything together and talk practically, because all of this research is only useful if it translates into something you can actually do. Let me give you what I think are the most important practical takeaways from everything we've covered. First, consistency matters more than quantity. The Rush University study we discussed found benefits associated with 1 to 2 servings of leafy greens per day, not massive quantities. A serving is roughly 1 cup of raw spinach or half a cup of cooked. That's not a lot. A handful of spinach added to a smoothie, or a side of sautéed spinach with dinner, or spinach stirred into eggs in the morning, any of those gets you there. Second, how you prepare spinach matters for what you're trying to get out of it. Cooking spinach actually increases the bioavailability of some nutrients, particularly beta-carotene and lutein, because heat breaks down the cell walls and releases compounds that are otherwise trapped. At the same time, cooking spinach reduces its volume dramatically, which makes it easier to eat a meaningful amount. On the other hand, eating raw spinach preserves its vitamin C content and its thylakoids. The ideal approach is to vary it, some days cooked, some days raw, so you're getting the full spectrum of what spinach offers. Third, pairing spinach with healthy fats significantly increases absorption of fat-soluble nutrients. Lutein, beta-carotene, and vitamin K are all fat-soluble, meaning your body absorbs them much more efficiently when fat is present. Drizzling olive oil over cooked spinach, adding avocado to a spinach salad, or blending spinach into a smoothie with a few almonds are all ways to make the nutrients in spinach work harder. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2004 actually demonstrated this directly. Adding avocado to salad increased carotenoid absorption from the salad by up to 15 times compared to eating it without fat. Fourth, if you take blood thinners, talk to your doctor before making a significant change to how much spinach you eat regularly, but do not assume you need to avoid it. The key is consistency. If you eat roughly the same amount of spinach week to week, your doctor can calibrate your medication accordingly. Sudden large changes are the issue, not regular moderate consumption. Fifth, spinach is most powerful as part of a dietary pattern, not as a magic single food. What the research consistently shows is that a dietary pattern high in leafy greens, alongside other whole foods, produces the most significant and measurable health benefits. The Mediterranean dietary pattern, the MIND diet, which was specifically designed to protect brain health and was published in Alzheimer's and Dementia Journal in 2015, both include leafy greens as a foundational component. Spinach is one of the best representatives of that category, but it works best as part of a larger pattern of eating. I also want to briefly address some of the questions I know come up around spinach. Kidney stones. If you have a history of calcium oxalate kidney stones, you should discuss your spinach intake with your doctor, because oxalates can contribute to stone formation in people who are susceptible. For most people, staying well hydrated while eating spinach is sufficient to manage this risk, but individual circumstances vary. Gas and bloating. Some people find that spinach causes digestive discomfort, particularly when eaten raw in large quantities. Cooking spinach typically reduces this issue. Thyroid considerations. Spinach contains goitrogens, compounds that in very high quantities can theoretically interfere with thyroid function, but the amounts you would need to eat consistently to cause a problem are far beyond what any reasonable daily consumption looks like. This concern is mostly relevant for people who are juicing enormous quantities of raw greens daily, not for someone having a serving or two of spinach. Let me summarize what we've covered today, because we've covered a lot. After the age of 60, spinach consumed daily provides your brain with the folate, lutein, and vitamin K it needs to slow cognitive decline, protect nerve cell function, and support the neurotransmitter production that keeps your mood stable. Multiple studies, including landmark research from Rush University and the University of Illinois, show measurable differences in cognitive function between people who eat leafy greens consistently and those who don't, differences equivalent to years of brain aging. Your heart benefits from spinach's nitrates, which produce nitric oxide that lowers blood pressure. Its magnesium supports heart rhythm. Its potassium counterbalances sodium. Its vitamin K helps prevent arterial calcification. The research supporting each of these pathways comes from peer-reviewed journals, including Hypertension, the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and the Journal of Nutrition. Your bones benefit from spinach's vitamin K, which activates the proteins that bind calcium to bone, and from its magnesium, which regulates how calcium is metabolized. The oxalate issue is real but manageable. Eat spinach alongside other calcium sources rather than relying on it as your sole calcium food. Your eyes benefit from spinach's extraordinary concentration of lutein and zeaxanthin, which accumulate in the macula and protect against age-related macular degeneration, a finding confirmed by the National Eye Institute's AREDS research and supported by multiple subsequent studies. The antioxidants in spinach also appear to slow cataract formation and may support healthy intraocular pressure. Your gut benefits from spinach's sulfoquinavose fiber, which feeds one of the most important anti-inflammatory bacteria in your digestive tract. Its flavonoids support microbiome diversity, its thylakoids promote satiety hormones, and a healthy gut, as we now understand, supports virtually every other system in your body, including your brain. All of this from one green vegetable that costs almost nothing and takes about 5 minutes to prepare. If there's one thing I want you to take away from everything we've talked about today, it's this. You are not powerless over how your body ages. The research is clear that food is one of the most powerful tools available to you. Not a supplement, not a miracle cure, actual food, eaten consistently over time. Spinach is one of the most well-studied, most affordable, most accessible examples of food as medicine that exists in the nutritional literature. And for people over 60 whose bodies are working harder to absorb nutrients, whose brains and hearts and eyes and guts are facing the specific challenges of aging, the benefits of eating spinach every day are not theoretical. They are documented, replicated, and compelling. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Are you already eating spinach regularly? Do you have questions about any of the research we talked about today? Or are there other foods or topics you'd like me to dig into next? Leave a comment below because your questions genuinely shape what I cover next. And if this kind of research-based, no-nonsense health information is useful to you, subscribe and hit the bell. I put out new content every week, and every video is built the same way. Real research, real numbers, practical takeaways, no fluff. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.